Welcome to Ameros Radio.
Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Ameros Radio. It is Tuesday, April 17th, 2010, and I'm your host, Jesse Calhoun, broadcasting live from Albany, New York. Last week we had Danny Pease and the Regulators, a great dirty punk reggae band out of Massachusetts. And tonight I have a great guest on, John Gold, and his new book, 9/11 Truther, The Fight for Peace, Justice, and Accountability, is now available on Amazon for just $5.99. I definitely recommend going out and getting it. It's really affordable, and you can find out kind of why, over 10 years later, people are still talking about 9/11 and the importance of getting the story right. I want to go ahead and welcome John to the show. John, thanks for being on the show tonight.
Hi, Jesse. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. So let's talk about your new book, 9/11 Truther, The Fight for Peace, Justice, and Accountability. It's been over 10 years since 9/11. Why is it still important, and why are you writing this book?
Well, first I want to thank you for having me on. Why is it so important? Well, we're living in the post-9/11 world. And what does that mean? Well, currently, they're wiretapping, they're torturing, there are renditions, there are things called national security letters, where it's illegally and immorally occupying countries that had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. There's the destruction of the Constitution, the deficit, the reinstatement of COINTELPRO. I mean, I could go on, but, there are a lot of things that have happened as a result of that day. And if that day was not what we were led to believe, and it most certainly wasn't, then the people need to know about that so that we could, take the proper steps to correct things.
Right. Yeah, you definitely said a lot right there. The whole United States seems to have shifted gears, and there's a lot of drastic changes, like you said. We're in the post-9/11 world. You mentioned at the end some people might not be familiar with COINTELPRO. What is that? When did it exist before, and what's the significance of it being reinstated?
Well, during the 1960s and I think early 70s, the FBI took part in what's called COINTELPRO. Basically, they infiltrated groups like the Black Panthers. They harassed people like Martin Luther King. And in the 1970s, there was something called the church hearings, which took place in the Senate, and they made sure that COINTELPRO was shut down, because obviously it fights against the First Amendment. After 9/11, it was reinstated. John Ashcroft reinstated it. And, we've seen there are a multitude of examples of, over the past 10 years, of the FBI infiltrating different groups or spying on different groups. I belong to Piece of the Action, which was founded by Cindy Sheehan, and that group was spied on by a group called ITRR. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but they spied on us. They were subcontracted by the Department of Homeland Security for Pennsylvania. When I chained myself to the White House fence on January 31st, 2011, when I got there, the officer asked me, he said, "Is your name Mr. Gold?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you still planning on chaining yourself to the White House fence?" I said, "Yes." So, it's apparent that people are watching. Now, just the other day I heard a commercial for the New Jersey Transit Authority that asked people to call a number if they saw someone acting suspicious, that we are on the, quote, front line in the war on terror, end quote, and that we should stay alert to stay alive.
Wow.
This is the world we live in now.
Right, and those messages are pretty much everywhere. I've seen on the buses here we have similar things posted. If you see something, say something is kind of the big mantra for all that. But carry on. What else about that?
Well, I'm just saying, this is an example of the kind of world we're living in now, what the post-9/11 world represents. And, why is it important? Here's a quote, April 17th, just yesterday, from the U.S. Ambassador to Afghanistan, Ryan Crocker. Quote, "To get out before the Afghans have a full grip on security, which is a couple of years out, would be to invite the Taliban, Haqqani, and al-Qaeda back in and set the stage for another 9/11. And that, I think, is an unacceptable risk for any American. So, there's the U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan using 9/11 as the justification for staying in Afghanistan. A war that I believe a majority of Americans are against at this point and want to bring to a close. So, why is it important? Because this whole world is a direct result of that day and how it's been used.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you hope that a reader of your book will end up walking away with when they finish?
Well, I hope they come to a realization that not everybody who pushes, the problems with the official account of 9/11 are crazy, wacky conspiracy theorists. That, we're everyday Americans, a lot of us, just like the majority of everyone else. We were all affected by that day. And I hope that they see that there are problems with the official account, that there is information that exists that we would be irresponsible as citizens to ignore, that they understand that there are family members that have wanting real justice, and not the kind you get at Gitmo, but real justice and accountability for what happened that day for 10 years, and they've been denied that. The people of the world and the families both require and deserve real justice and real accountability for what happened that day. If somebody wants to make the argument that people were incompetent in government, then you know what? Guess what? Incompetence also qualifies as something that someone should be held accountable for. Not rewarded,
right,
not promoted like they were. So, to give you an example, I think there's a 9% approval rating right now of Congress. If I had a 9% approval rating at my job, I would lose my job. So
definitely, quickly, yeah. So I'm glad you bring that up. Let's talk about the commission report itself. Was it the complete and thorough investigation that it sought out to be, or was it something else? We kind of get just the end result, and we don't see really the process and how it happened. Would you want to talk about that a little?
Sure, I'd love to talk about that. Honestly, I believe that in order to get people to agree that we need a real criminal investigation into what happened that day, that they're first shown that the investigations we got into 9/11 were a farce, were compromised and corrupt from start to finish. So, let's talk about the 9/11 Commission. The 9/11 Commission was mandated, and this is directly from the website. Quote, the Commission's mandate is to provide a, quote, full and complete accounting, end quote, of the attacks of September 11, 2001, and recommendations as to how to prevent such attacks in the future. Specifically, Section 604 of Public Law 107306 requires the Commission to investigate, quote, facts and circumstances relating to the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, including those relating to intelligence agencies, law enforcement agencies, diplomacy, immigration, non-immigrant visas, border control, the flow of assets to terrorist organizations. That's an important one. Commercial aviation, the role of congressional oversight and resource allocation, and other areas determined relevant by the Commission for its inquiry. Now, I say the flow of assets to terrorist organizations is important. The 9/11 Commission said that the source of the funding for the attacks was of little practical significance. And today we have people like former Senator Bob Kerrey, former Senator Bob Graham, I forget what it's called, filing an injunction or something that says they suspect that the Saudi government had a part to play in the 9/11 attacks. And wouldn't you know that the Bush administration did everything within its power to cover up any and all aspects of that part of the investigation. So, that's just one example of how the 9/11 Commission failed. But everything that they failed to include in the 9/11 report things like whistleblowers, and there were a multitude of whistleblowers who came forward that the 9/11 Commission ignored and censored. And they, everything that wasn't in it shows that they failed at their task of providing a, quote, full and complete accounting of what happened that day.
Right.
And you can go back to the Joint Congressional Inquiry, which, was run by Shelby, Goss, Graham. It was limited in scope. They only looked, I believe, at intelligence agencies. And there was 28 redacted pages from the Joint Congressional Inquiry that has yet to be released, and it has to do with Saudi financing of the attacks. It's part of what Bob Graham and Bob Kerry are talking about. So, that wasn't covered in the 9/11 report, and as a matter of fact, the individual who was the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, his name is Philip Zelikow, he fired Dana Leisman, who tried to get those 28 redacted pages. He first made it difficult for her, and then I think she went through back channels to try and get them, and he fired her. This is the man.
Right.
This is supposed to be an independent, nonpartisan or bipartisan commission, and we have a commissioner, the guy who's in charge of it, who's helping to cover up what happened. That's
right. I'm so glad you bring this up, because so many people say that, if something like this were to happen and there was negligence that they were covering up, like, why wasn't there anyone who came forward? And a lot of people will say, oh, no one came out and no one said anything, but that's really far from the truth. Like you're saying, there's a lot of people who did come out and did say things, but that's all left out of this report, right?
Correct. There's an entire list of whistleblowers. In November of 2007, the Jersey girl Patty Casaza gave a talk in Hartford, Connecticut, and she spoke about how she went to Thomas Keene and brought these whistleblowers to him, and he said that each and every one of them would be heard, and hardly any of them were. So much for a full and complete accounting of what happened that day. And the 9/11 Commission was limited in time. It was limited in financing, and this is only the murder of 2,973 people. I think the number now is 2,976 people. I think they raised it a couple of points, but it's only the murder of that many people, and you're going to limit the amount of time, the funding to investigate what happened. Come on now.
Yeah, and I believe weren't there other investigations over much lesser.
Well, the thing is, it started out with the Joint Congressional Inquiry. The FBI was pulled off of the 9/11 investigation and put on to the anthrax attacks. In an investigation, you need continuity in order to have a thorough investigation, and that was not done. The FBI's investigation was called the Pent Bomb investigation. There was I believe there was a press conference, and FBI Director Mueller was not really answering the family's questions. That's part of the reason they fought for the creation of the 9/11 Commission, which was supposed to be a blue ribbon, subpoena power and everything. That's another thing. The 9/11 Commission had subpoena power and rarely used it. Instead, they used what were called document requests, which could be and were ignored. So how can I could go on. Philip Zelikow wrote with Ernest May a complete outline of what the final 9/11 report was going to look like before the investigation even started. So, they had a predetermined story, a predetermined narrative that they were going to write, and they were going to find bits and pieces of information that supported this narrative and leave it at that. That's not.
Wow. It's just so. It's really. That's kind of just so offensive that they start with the end. I remember when the comic book came out of the commission report. It's almost as if they sought to create a mythology more than a thorough account or any kind of investigation at all.
Right.
And now you've mentioned a couple people's names. So you've mentioned Patty Casaza and some other family members who have been really invested in this thing. And I think that's a point that a lot of people might not know, is that some people might think that it's offensive to people who had, lost people in this. But you've done a lot of work with family members and people who lost loved ones. Why is it so important to them to get the story right? And what are some of the stories they tell? What is the significance of all this to them?
Well, there is a lot of family members, people who lost people that day, and they range from people like Lori Van Auken, the Jersey Girls, Bob McElvain, who fight for justice and accountability, and then there are others who believe everything that we were told about that day, hook, line, and sinker, like Deborah Burlingame, who was I hate to say it, she was the poster child for the war on terror for a good number of years. She was the go-to person that the media went to every time they needed a 9/11 family member to sell, this war on terror. So the family members, they're tired. And one of the things that Patty Casaza said that stood out to me was that each time they do this, they die a little. And so it's very difficult for them to stay active. And it's especially difficult for them to want to stay active in an atmosphere like we're in right now in this country, where it's nigh impossible to get real justice and accountability for what happened that day because of the courts, because of the media's refusal to cover the issues like they should, because of the people in government who refuse to cover this issue. So it's very frustrating for them. One of the stories that Lori Van Auken told me a long time ago that really stood out to me, at a time when their children and their families were grieving, they had to go to Washington, D.C. to fight for a real investigation into how their loved ones were murdered, into how their husbands were murdered. So think about that for a second. This is something that should automatically be done, day one in Washington, D.C., to want to investigate everything about what happened that day, to find out who exactly was responsible, and yet they had to go to D.C. to fight for it. That should tell people something. The Bush administration did not want to investigate what happened that day.
Right. It is amazing to think that it didn't go through the standard, just how you would treat any murder, be it one person or 2,000 plus. It's just amazing to think of what that must have been like in their shoes to have to be doing that when they're under that period of stress. Yeah.
Exactly. Think about, I don't know how much you know about 9/11. I'm assuming a lot, but imagine knowing everything that you know about 9/11 on top of having lost someone that day. Can you put yourself in those shoes? Because I can't. I can't imagine what it's like. And that's part of what motivates me, because they deserve better. We all do. So, I can't imagine. They had to watch the names of their loved ones used to do horrific things around this world and in this country. All the while not knowing exactly what happened that day, who was ultimately responsible, and it's very sad. It's very sad. And I wish that I could take away the pain that they have, but I could never do that.
Right.
The families.
It's so difficult, and I feel like only the truth coming out and real truth and not speculation and just what really happened, and they deserve to know that like anyone would. And it's not just the families too, like you said. It's like we try and wrap our heads around it as just everyday citizens,
right.
And it's so amazing how it can affect them, and then
right.
it
and then I'm
us.
sure you get angry. I'm sure you get frustrated. But now put those emotions on top of having lost someone that day. it's unreal. It's unimaginable.
Yeah, and I have to just the strength that they have had, and I've heard Bob McElvain speak before, and just I'd encourage anyone to look at it on the internet or see what they're doing, see what they're saying, just to see really what's going on, because it's a side that doesn't get told very much.
No,
so
not at all.
How does it affect? Yeah, definitely. How does it affect the rest of everyone out here as well? Like, how does it tie into everything that's going on, and why should everyone, care about this issue? Why does it matter to just, anyone who's out there today?
Well, as we discussed earlier, the post 9/11 world is a detriment to humanity. We're killing people over there. That's horrible. And we're also making it so that people would want to kill us over here, in a retaliatory way. So that is affecting us in that way. I don't know that I'm being wiretapped. I don't like not knowing whether or not I'm being wiretapped. Why is it important? Because every day we hear about 9/11, and we're reminded of 9/11, and we're not told the truth about 9/11, and we get to watch 9/11 used for just horrible things. When Obama came into office, he had a meeting with the family members, and the Jersey Girls attended, as well as Beverly Eckert, who unfortunately she died like a week later. But the family members went to meet with Obama, and the topic of the discussion was closing down Gitmo. That was the purpose of meeting him, because he wanted to get their input. And wouldn't you know, a week later, he used that meeting with the family members to justify the first surge of troops to Afghanistan. So he essentially used the photo opportunity as a good reminder as to why we need to send troops to Afghanistan. And
and that's just the type of lie that just is so. That just would cause someone to be so angry. Just to have your pure purpose totally flipped for political means is just, and
right.
To use people like that is just a sick thing.
And look, Gitmo is not closed, and they're going through with these kangaroo courts that are not justice by any stretch of the imagination. The families and ACLU got together to fight for civilian trials, because in civilian trials you actually have to do things like produce real evidence, and things like torture or evidence obtained through torture is not allowed, and all that stuff. We're still going through with Gitmo, even though he promised to shut it down.
If I recall, too, it seems like he ran on the campaign that he was going to close it down. He ran so contrary to Bush, but then became almost identical, except a little different in the social programs. But back to your book, Cindy Sheehan, she wrote the foreword in your book. How did that come about, and what's your kind of relationship with her?
My relationship with Cindy is I love her to death. She's like my big sister and one of my best friends. And anyway, I've always supported Cindy. Like in June 2005, when they had the Downing Street memo hearings in the basement of the Capitol building, I stayed home from work that day to watch, and that was the first time I had heard of Cindy. It was her. John Conyers was holding the hearings. It was Ray McGovern, Cindy Sheehan, Ambassador Joe Wilson, and I want to say Mark Zaid, but I don't think that was the attorney that was there that day. Anyway, that was the first time I'd heard of her, and I followed her ever since. I followed her and supported her to the best of my ability when she was in Camp Casey. And then, my book talks about some of the shenanigans that have taken place within the 9/11 Truth Movement. And one of those shenanigans was that Webster Tarpley wrote something called, I guess, the Kennebunkport Warning, and it asked for people to sign this thing saying that you denounce a false flag attack, coming up in such and such a time, or whatever. And there were Cindy never signed it. Dahlia Wasfi never signed it, and yet, we had this whole hoo-ha going on. Anyway, Webster sent out an email that essentially referred to Cindy as, I think, a wretched individual, and I took great offense to that. I called him out for it. This is somebody who lost their son in the Iraq War in this illegal, unjustified, immoral war, and we have this idiot calling her a wretched individual because she didn't sign a little thing that he wanted her to sign or something to that effect, and that was absurd. So I called him out, and then wouldn't you know, in September of 2007, I think, at the anniversary in New York City, Webster Tarpley got on stage and he accused me of being COINTELPRO, and a few other people, Michael Woolsey, Cosmos. Anyway, and he actually had somebody contracted to draw a real political cartoon depicting people like Michael Woolsey and Cosmos and other people as being part of Chip Burley's Ford Foundation. This is the kind of shit that Webster Tarpley does. Anyway, so I sent an email to Cindy apologizing on behalf of the good people in the 9/11 Truth Movement for what Webster did. And as a result, we've been friends ever since. So I thank Webster for being an idiot, because if not, I would have never have met Cindy.
Well, there you go.
And, I asked her to write the foreword for my book. I've been very much involved with her over the last several years with Piece of the Action and stuff like that. And she did it, and it's my honor to have it. And also, I want to mention something. Thursday, April 19th, this Thursday, at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, which is California time, over on the left coast, at U.S. Court, 501 I Street in Sacramento, California, peace activist and Gold Star mother Cindy Sheehan is a conscientious war tax resistor, and the U.S. Attorney on behalf of the IRS has summoned her to court to produce requested documents. Cindy is calling for a rally before the hearing in Sacramento, California, and wants everyone who can make it to be there to support her and show opposition to the war machine, the wars, and other oppressions. So if you're in the California area on Thursday this week at 10:30, go out and support Cindy. This is somebody who lost her son in this illegal, unjust war. She doesn't owe the system that killed him a damn thing.
Yeah, she's paid more than her share, right? I mean, so anyway, spread the word about that. That's crucial to go out and be active if you're, trying to make change. How about, are there any other people? We got about a minute left before the live portion cuts off, but then there's some more left on the podcast that people can tune in and catch the rest of it. Are there any other people who have been very influential in the writing of this book and who really inspires some sessions in here?
Well, a lot of people have influenced the book. A lot of people have influenced my work over the years, and I give a huge thank you at the end to a number of people. Cindy Sheehan, Paul Thompson, who was the creator of the 9/11 timeline, Nafiz Ahmed, who wrote the books War on Freedom, War on Truth, Peter Dale Scott, John Judge, and Carl Hentz, who were the founders of 9/11 Citizens Watch, which helped to monitor alongside the 9/11 Family Steering Committee the 9/11 Commission during the time of the 9/11 Commission. These people were very influential to me over the years, and I don't know that they inspired me to write anything. A lot of it is just my own learning experience. What happened to me from my perspective. But so many people have influenced me over the years, and some of the most amazing people in history. It's like the Jersey Girls, Donna Marsh O'Connor, Bob McElvain. The list goes on and on. Cynthia McKinney. They're very amazing people in this day and age. And I'm fortunate
right.
to know a lot of them.
Yeah, there's so many that have just, been crucial in spreading the message and talking about what really happened, So any of those names, I definitely...
I'm sorry. Just a shout-out to Janice Matthews, who helped to edit the book, and also Mike Berger, who helped put the book together. Anyway, go ahead.
Definitely. Any of those names are, worth checking out and seeing where their paths led them, you mentioned Paul Thompson of the Truth Timeline, the 9/11 Timeline, and just any of those names, replay the podcast and check them out. I definitely recommend it, and get the book. It should be great. I'm getting my copy very soon, and I look forward to reading it as well. I've been familiar with your work for a while, and just with the family members and their quest and how it's so hard for them. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for being on the show tonight, John, and I just really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse, for having me on.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and... Yep, you too.
All right.
Was there anything you wanted to add? Or... Okay. So that's it. You just heard John Gold. His book is 9/11 Truther, The Fight for Peace, Justice, and Accountability. And you can get it on Amazon. He's putting it out there. And it's a great interview talking about, how 9/11 Truth is still relevant today, and how the family members are still out there trying to get an investigation into the actual facts of what happened and to get the story straight. And they deserve it, just like anyone would in any murder like that. So I'm going to play a song, New American Century. We will talk to you next week, and just thanks to all the listeners for tuning in. Please download the podcast, spread it all over the place. We want to get, this independent media spread out, and since the mainstream media doesn't necessarily cover these things, or they, don't necessarily focus on this because, it needs to have a buzz. It needs to be, right now, current to the mainstream media. We don't necessarily need that to be true. We just need you, the listener, to value it and spread it. So thank you so much for tuning in and doing what you do. And I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place on Ameros Radio.
American penitentiary.